happy that people are joining in today because our businesses here are very dynamic, so very resilient. Hit them with any crisis lah. Hit them with any crisis. Sam will vouch for this. Hit the Penangites with any crisis lah. They will pull through. They will succeed. They will grow. They're very resilient, very flexible, and that makes them very dynamic. That's the fun part of working with Penang clients. I've always experienced fun in the sense that they're open to learning. That makes us as consultants, makes us our life more interesting too, because there's people willing to learn. And, whenever you give them new ideas and all that, they're willing to try it. So it's a very dynamic group of people, I would say, business leaders in Penang. Very dynamic people.
Quite tight-knit community also. I think Penang,
Yes.
not as big as KL, Selangor. Everyone kind of knows everyone.
One thing I'll always proud of, you go to whenever I'm teaching, whenever I'm conducting programs or employability and all these different programs to make our graduates employable, I always tell them, I'm not saying English is very important, but let me give you an example. You go to any person selling pisang goreng in Penang, Tanjung area, Batu Tinggi area, all the machiks will speak English, right? To a level, most of them are very conversant in Hokkien, right? But they will speak good English to an extent that they can understand, and they can have a communication with the customers from all over, because there's a lot of big tourism, so
they're very exposed to the outside world.
You'll be surprised. Even you go to the markets, people speak English. Everybody, because your customers.
Rojak lah.
Our customers here, Rojak, expatriates. We are actually a very international island. We got people from all over the world living here.
That's right.
So it's a whole how should I say, it's a fun place. That's why I convinced my boss these days, to let me go to Penang. Come back to Penang.
Hey, don't pretend like that, you prefer Penang.
Of course. So, people coming in? More people? Still early.
Not yet.
Right. Let's give us some time. These are the awkward moments before even training programs,
Kind of conducting online.
Yeah.
Right?
You're the expert.
Awkward moment before you start, getting people to come in, and you're trying to do, trying to, kind of like while away with our talks and all that.
Good morning.
Morning, Jillau.
Listen.
You have your coffee still.
Coffee, of course.
I'm on a caffeine break, so I'm just drinking plain water 3 liters a day.
So healthy.
Akila, you must understand, there are 2 substances important here. So if you don't go for the other one, coffee very important. My doctor told me I'm not supposed to take coffee for a couple of months. I said anything else but coffee. So the guy will say, okay, the gun is a serious problem, but you take all these supplements and medication, but try to cut down on the coffee. That's the only thing I can cut down. Sitting by the highway.
How's the sound on your end? Sound check.
I know, okay.
How about mine? Clear?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sam, but I think you are like you're very bright, Sam. I cannot see your handsome face that clearly.
I think it's also my camera quality. Together.
Your sunlight on your left, I think.
Yeah.
Morning sun.
Yeah. Hold on.
Sam's office is a very nice place actually. It's faces the waterfront. Yeah, his office is especially when you're in his office in the so you can see the sea and all that. Very nice.
How's that? Bit better?
Yep. Yep. Luckily, all of us are not seated in the same room. Then the lighting issue will be a problem. You have to put more light on me and Mr. Supra.
Then we'll have to wear masks.
Imagine the casting crew. Imagine if they are in the studio now. The casting crew will go crazy. Sini kena tambah lampu, sini kena kurang lampu.
Sam?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Jim. It's loud.
A bit soft,
You saw that?
Sam, how many participants are Sam?
We're waiting on a couple more.
For more,
Yeah, we had about, I think, about 15 people registered
Yeah.
online. Yeah, and then the some there are more.
Yeah, waiting for
Yeah.
them,
Yes, yes.
to sign in,
Yeah, they're coming in now. So we still have a few more minutes now. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll get started in another minute lah.
These are your team,
Yeah. These are the panelists for today. I don't know. Then afterwards I'll introduce them.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next long, the talk.
I'll go for I think about 11:45 then. There's some questions. You can Q&A.
I see.
Hi, morning.
Hey, everyone. Welcome.
Mr. Lau, the sound okay?
Chairman.
Hi, welcome.
Welcome, Miss Kelly. Hey.
Everything alright there?
Working from home.
Everything alright there? Yeah. In a nutshell. Good morning. Good morning, June. Good morning, Annie. Alright. I guess shall we start on the intros? Okay. Quick reminder, guys, just to if you're not talking, just mute your microphones. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, just a gentle reminder, guys. Just mute your microphones if you're not talking. If you guys want to ask questions, feel free to post in the chat. Okay, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. But not to worry, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end. Thanks. Okay, I think we'll start. Yes. All right. Good morning.
People can join in as they come in.
Oh yes, definitely. Okay, I think it's about time. So, good morning everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. So, I'm Sam. I'll be the moderator for this coffee talk. As we have mentioned, this HR talk is organized for all of you, for exclusively for our Caritech, vStaff, our friends and clients. So, why are we having this talk? I guess why are you here, right? So, working together with our partners, iHR Consulting, we aim to provide our customers and our friends with a continual learning platform, okay, to enhance the knowledge and know-how of HR management here in Malaysia. Okay. So, as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic, has unearthed a lot of new challenges for us in HR management. So as we move into this new phase, of our recovery, where businesses are now starting to open back up and operate at full capacity with new SOP and guidelines, so too our HR has to evolve, has to change. So that's why we're having this little chat, this little sharing session. Okay, so we ourselves feel that this is going to be a bit of a confusing phase because this is new to everyone, the new normal. So whether we like it or not, the employment landscape in Malaysia has been changed permanently, for better or for worse. We're not sure. But these questions came to our mind, is our employment contracts suitable for the new norm? Right? Is our employment contract bulletproof, against disputes and claims? Is it ready? Are we ready to adapt, right? Or if we're not, we have to be, right? So first, today we have our three very experienced panel members, okay, who will be sharing their knowledge, and we're going through some questions that you may have. So thanks for any of you that have already posed questions to us. But so yeah, we'll be going through these with our guys who are experts in industrial relations and human resource management. Okay, so first let me introduce them. We have Mr. Rajasundram, who is a resident industrial relations and civil litigation lawyer. Sorry, Amma. Okay, yep. So we have Mr. Rajasundram, right, our industrial relations and civil litigation lawyer. Right, and so he is with Raja, Devan and Veni, and he has over 20 years experience in industrial relations litigation, as I mentioned, and he represents clients in basically all fields, all types of businesses. Right? So his clients include MNCs, GLCs, and SMEs across the board. Right? So let's welcome him, Mr. Raja, and welcome. Okay, and next we have Mr. Supra Ramasamy. So he is the executive director of iHR Consulting, and he has over 20 years of experience in the field of human resource management. Okay, so he's very experienced in setting up HR departments, designing organizational HR practices and code of conduct, and includes performance management strategies, okay, and how to implement them. Okay, so Mr. Supra there. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, and then thirdly, and last but not least, of course, we have Mr. Muhammad Daniel. So he's the director of the Northern Region for iHR Consulting. All right, and he has over 15 years of experience in the field of HR management consultancy, and he's one of Penang Lang, like myself. Okay, so you can see him enjoying a nasi kandar any time of the day.
Unfortunately, can't eat out anymore, lah.
Not yet. Yeah. So okay, let's get straight into it. So if, like I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can please feel free to post in the chat. So chat's up there on the second icon. All right, and then if you want, you can raise your hand. But we will have a Q&A session at the end for you to ask additional questions. Okay. All right. So to get us started, perhaps Mr. Raja, would you like to start us off with what is a definition of a contract and also an agreement in the simplest context?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
All right. Now let me start with the simplest layman term of definition of an agreement first. Agreement basically most of the time is to find something as a mutual understanding between parties, and once one person performs that understanding or the agreement, then it automatically converted to a contract. right? So now contract can be in writing or can be in verbal also. So the fundamental is as long after the agreement one already performed, then automatically converted into a contract. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Supra, do you have anything to add?
I think in the simplest term, I can give an agreement is when my son promises to do his homework, and I agree, okay, I'll buy him dinner after that. So we have entered into an agreement. Okay. So he can't then reach that because I have got no intention of buying him dinner. But I just, said I would buy the dinner if you finish your homework. Right? So it's an agreement, right? But you can't take it and you got the job. So it's exactly like what Raja said, because I did not take that agreement and understanding that we have and put it in writing or into a contractual form. Right? So if I put it in the contractual form, that form should be thought up.
Okay. So what you're saying is that all contracts are agreements, right? But not an agreement may or may not be a contract.
Yeah.
All right. So
just to add on here,
yeah, please,
just
Mr. Dan.
like to add on is, for example, in where we live, that mostly we hire people to do repairs in the house, that, right? And we don't write a formal contract. So it's an agreement is, I'll repair this plumbing for you and it'll be 600 ringgit. Now, until and unless he performs that job, then there is no binding contract yet. I don't have to pay him the money yet. Right? But once he performs the job, then it becomes a contract. He has performed his contractual obligation, I have to pay him. That's
even though there's nothing written, nothing. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Daniel. Okay, so perhaps Mr. Raja, you'd like to give us more of a definition of a contract in accordance to the Contracts Act of 1950.
Sure. Now, contract in the Contracts Act is defined as any agreement which is enforceable will become a contract when there is a consideration involved. Consideration here means monetary value is involved. That means when an agreement is entered, one party performs it, and once he has performed, the money value is attached to the service, right? And that becomes a contract, and Contracts Act defines this act and conduct as a fully performed contract or ongoing contract. And most of the time, commercial contracts are governed under the Contracts Act, and parties who enter into contracts are willing parties. It's not like one party is forcing another to perform. Then it becomes legal contract already because the other party is not agreeing to perform or be party to the contract. Here there must be willing parties and there must be some form of value attached to the contract.
Okay, thanks. All right. So how is employment contract governed under the Contracts Act? Like what does it say about employment contract specifically?
Okay. Contracts Act does not define employment contract per se in that sense. There is no detailed explanation under the Contracts Act, but Contracts Act, for example, prohibits certain type of terms and conditions that cannot be imposed on another person. If I may give you an example, Contracts Act prohibits restraint of trade. That means when you engage an expert to come and work for you under the Employment Act, and then you impose a contract or clause saying after leaving my company you cannot work for a competitor for next 3 years.
Oh, so that's not.
Okay. Cannot. Contract Act says cannot.
Okay.
It's prohibited, and it is also against public policy. Right? To stop someone from being gainfully employed is wrong.
Okay.
So here we have employment contract. Here we have Contracts Act. The Contracts Act says certain clauses cannot be inserted. This is how Contracts Act comes in. But otherwise, most of the time, employment contracts are independent by its nature itself. Right? Yeah.
Okay, next. So what does the EA 1955 say about contracts then? Can be entered either in verbal or in written format, but what about if it's more than 30 days? Must you issue a written contract?
Right. Now, EA, we have to understand the historical part of Employment Act. Employment Act 1955 was acted even before we gained our independence in 1957, right? So it has a lot of historical value. Back then, the nature of businesses are more of a gentleman agreement, understanding. Okay, you come and work, I pay you. So in the Act, it really says contract can be verbal or oral or in writing. So it does not say it has to be in writing. So but it's highly encouraged the contract to be entered into a writing in today's nature. But historically speaking, it is oral, verbal, and in writing. Right? So once the party have already entered and performed that function under the employment contract, there is already a master-servant relationship or an employer-employee relationship. So even now, if you don't have a employment contract, the law still recognize that relationship as an employment contract, even though it's not in writing. So many people are thinking, I have not issued an employment contract, so I don't have to comply with other provision of the law and all that. No, somehow or other the law will catch up with you, and then you will be made to answerable according to the law. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Daniel or Mr. Supra, do you guys have anything to add?
I think to add for the Employment Act, despite the fact it says that you can enter into an employment, whether verbal, oral, or format, right? But it does specifically say for when the work is or a contract duration is more beyond 30 days, it is mandatory for you to actually put the contract in, right?
Okay.
I think they gave a bit of a flexibility within the 30 days because sometimes you just hire people for the day, just pay them off, right? So they wanted to have that certain flexibility, and like what Mr. Raja just said earlier, right? The Employment Act back in 1985, and they were hiring workers as and when required. Like there's a boom time, they people, and they probably work in this short duration of time, right? So they cannot be issuing contract after contract after contract. So with this, the Employment Act says, okay, you enter into a master-servant relationship, that's already a binding contract. But if you are hiring someone, beyond the 30 days, then they say you must put it in writing.
Okay. But what about in the case where an employer does not issue an employment contract, but still pays the employee salary and statutory benefits? Is beyond the 30 days? Is the employment relationship valid?
Yes.
Yes, it is valid.
Yeah,
it is valid.
Okay.
You see, a lot of the, like Mr. Raja said earlier, a lot of the employers are under the impression they don't issue a contract, and then both parties are not satisfied, you just end the relationship just like that. But if you don't issue a contract after 8 months, after 12 months, there's no way you can say that, you can break the relationship because it's already a permanent employment relationship. But here's the thing, that when you don't issue a contract, it works, it's not, how should I say, it also works to the disadvantage of the employer, because let's say, for example, let this guy work with you for almost a year already, right? And then now he gets a better job. You don't have a termination clause. He can just take his salary and walk off. Right? Because you don't have a termination clause. So what did he didn't abandon his job. There's no way he can find him for her. So that is the how should I say, the the loop, or how should I say, the gaps that would appear.
Yep.
Will come back and that puts the situation in a very disputable situation.
That's when you feel the lawyers.
It's best to have the employment contract.
Yeah, definitely have this something in writing.
The idea is, why you put a contract is, what you then spell out obligations of both parties. Say the employer, my obligation, right, is I'm going to pay you a salary for this position, these are the terms, these are the benefits I'm giving, right? And as part on the employee side, again, I am accepting this offer, right? And I'm going to fulfill this job, and these are my benefits, right? So when you don't state it in a written contract format, right? How do you remember all this? Right? After 6 months or 1 year down the line, was my traveling allowance, 500 or 300? Because say the company has to change of management. So all this. So that is why the ethics of putting in place the employment contract becomes crucial. For both the employee and the employee.
A reference point now. Okay, that's good. So, okay, now that we made the case that you should have a written contract, perhaps let's talk about the type of contracts. I understand there are two types of contracts, right? So for those who are not aware, there's a contract for service and there's contract of service. So perhaps, Mr. Raja, would you like to start us off? What's the difference between these contracts and the usage of the word of in for?
Right. Now, let me start off with defining what is contract for service.
Please.
Once we understand that scope, then it's easy to distinguish between of and for. Right. Now, contract for service is basically when we appoint an independent contractor to do some form of work. Now, I can give you an example, like assuming you are outsourcing your payroll company, right? That company performing the normal function that has been performed in the company.
Can you leave inside the gate? Dalam pagar boleh? Dalam boleh ya? Terima kasih ya.
Their contract will be defined under contract for service. That means they are appointed, for example, for 1 year, and in that duration, their fee, monthly fee or the yearly fee has been fixed. And the results that's expected out of this contract for service is basically for them to deliver, ensure that the payrolls are issued on time, the statutory obligations are met on time, and whatever other matters related to the payroll process are done and completed. The company staff will not get involved in the outsourced work, right? And assuming they did not perform, this outsourced company did not perform their obligation under the contract for service, then the rights of the employer is to go after them under the civil law, that is under the Contracts Act. Right, now let's come to contract of service. Contract of service is basically a contract which governs the way and manner in which that employee will perform the duties and functions under the contract of employment. Right? Here, the company or the master or the employer has a say how this contract must be performed. Right? For example, let's take a line leader or a manager in a factory environment. The company has a say how this manager is supposed to perform the duty. But when it comes to the contract for service, the example I gave earlier, for the payroll services, the company will not dictate how you're supposed to perform that function, because you are supposed to be an expert under that area. So here, contract of service, the employer will dictate the way the contract is to be performed, the time the contract is to be performed. For example, between 9 to 5 daily, 5 days a week, the terms are agreed, right? And benefits are also given under the contract of service. under the contract for service is just the service fee. That's it. You know, I hope this simple difference that I've given clarifies your doubt.
Okay, yes, that's good. Thanks. So how does the word of imply employment and for mean non-employment?
For service, it's basically I perform my function under the contract for fixed rate, fixed fee. You know, how I perform the duty doesn't really matter as long as I provide or deliver the outcome of the contract. You know, off service is basically ensuring the employees are performing the duties and function in accordance to the standard operating procedure or processes under the company. There is a fixed set rules and regulations that need to be complied with in performing that function of service.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Sam, sorry to interrupt, Sam.
No,
There's
please.
a guest waiting, Samuel Chu.
Yeah, I'm sorry, don't worry, I'll try and admit him, but he's can't join. Anyway, moving. Daniel, what have you? From your experience, what are some of the common errors that you have seen or encountered when you review contracts, and how do these errors impact the company?
Okay, this is a lot of, when you look at errors, normally, depends on the companies also. When you got all the companies which have been in operations for a long time, I think over the years they refined their contract and they're pretty okay. But this normally happens when in startups, which are just pretty new, 3-4 years, 4-5 years. Okay, a lot of times I find contracts, things that I find is non-compliance to employment. Why do I say that? See, the Employment Act basically covers employees who are salaries at 2,000 or below, right? So when you put in the employment contract terms like the Employment Act shall terms of the Employment Act shall prevail in your contract, that you're opening a lot of disputes. For example, right, you hire a guy, right, at 3,000 ringgit. Now you give him a contract saying that terms of the Employment Act shall prevail or shall apply. What happens is that now this guy will think I'm entitled to OT. Right? Because what? Although my letter says I will be entitled to benefits from the Employment Act. Right? So you're giving a very misleading information like that. And this happens because people actually, a lot of times new companies, they're trying to get a template for the employment letters. They tend to get samples from friends or even download something from the internet. Right? So they make this mistake. The other mistake a lot of companies make is, how should I say, the retirement clause. See, although we understand that retirement is at the age of 60, that's the law which was implemented in 2010, right? Now, why do we need to put it in law like this? Right? See, one of the conditions is that the employer cannot retire the employee before the age of 60, right? Only upon reaching 60, the employee can be retired. And then the employee also gets the message, at 60, the day I become 60, I'm going to be retired. So, from day one, you make it very clear, right? Because you cannot give it like, I've had cases in Penang where someone at the age of 62 and they're still not retired. So when I look at the employment letter, nothing states about retirement clause, right? The management also has not issued a letter to the staff saying you have reached 60 and you're retired. Now, at 62, when you want to retrench her, you have to pay her the 30 years of service. Now, but if you had put your clauses in place and issued the right letter, the additional 2 years after retirement is you don't have to. There's the length of service finished and retirement is over. Right. So these are the mistakes made.
Okay.
Another mistake normally I see is the transfer clause. See, even the law accepts transferring employee is the employer's right, based on business need, as long as the transfer is not used as a way to manage discipline or as a way of discriminating, right? That would not be allowed. However, the employer is allowed to transfer an employee for business need to a suitable position. It has to be suitable. You cannot take imagine for example, I give you a hotel example. You cannot take a book and transfer the guy to front office. Right? That transfer is, if it's a bit disputed, the hotel is going to lose. Because not relevant.
Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense, right? So it has to be relevant. So the transfer clause is very important. Right? So when you don't have a transfer clause and you want to transfer the employee, and the employee says, no, I don't accept. The employer can say, it's within my legal right. Yes, but you didn't tell me. When I first joined you, you didn't tell me I can be transferred anywhere. If not, I wouldn't join you. So again, we open ourselves for disputes. Okay? And then we like to, another one that I always see is people like to mislabel allowances. Right? Because you want to avoid statutory payments to reduce basically, you don't want to incur so much statutory payment, right? So a lot of them will mislabel the allowances, like when you give transport allowance, and this, of course, is how should I say, is exempted. But other allowances, like when something is permanent, it will be counted as wages, right? The attendance allowance, right? All that will be counted in wages the moment it becomes a permanent into your salary, right? Even your transport allowance, you put it fixed 500 a month, right? That's going to be disputable too, right? However, if you put your transport allowance saying employee shall be eligible to a maximum of 500 ringgit per month as transport allowance, that means this is on reimbursement.
Okay, so that's how you word it.
So it's very important how you word things, not simply putting a different label.
So then just now you mentioned the contracts, agreements, people getting from friends, or I think these days Google, right? So what's your opinion on people just downloading templates and samples from the internet? How do you feel about that?
One word. Sorry, two words. Very risky.
Risky, yeah. Why is that?
Because I'm sure Mr. Supra and Mr. Raja will say, but let me share. Because your employment contract has to define your organization, right? And what is your organization's terms of employment and your practices, right? How is the job done in your company, right? It has to be defined by you. And I think Mr. Raja has got a perfect example to tell you. Mr. Raja, will you
please. Mr. Raja.
If I were to simplify the aspect of downloading free templates and all that, you are basically inviting disaster, right? We have seen many contracts which works against the company when at a later stage when issues arises between the employer and employee, right? One example is a downloaded template shows arbitration clause, American arbitration clause in an employment contract, Malaysian employment contract, right? These people just downloaded, they only amended the basic information, the rest of it they just plug the whole thing.
So you change it to Malaysia.
Yeah, and in the first place, employment dispute should not go to arbitration. Arbitration, very, very expensive process, and it needs a lot of resources to handle the matter. Now, if employee were able to turn around and say, hey, how could you discipline me without you taking me to arbitration? Can you imagine that scenario happening? Because it's in the contract, right? They are enforcing their right under the contract. This is one example. And then I always say, a contract is a contract you can download. So if I were to draw an analogy with the shirt that I'm wearing, if I were to take off my shirt and pass it to Daniel to wear, it is a shirt, it still can fit him, but his shirt won't fit me. But whether my shirt will serve the purpose for Daniel or not, right?
Yeah,
so shirt is a shirt. Even if I were to give my shirt to a female, it is a shirt. It will cover them, but does it fit their purpose or not? So each and every contract must fit that job being offered. it is not I use the senior manager's employment contract template to my dispatch rider. Can you see the difference or not? At one side, we have a senior manager's contract, which dictates how the dispatch rider is supposed to perform his duties and responsibilities. There's vast difference. So best is always fit that contract to the need of the job. So to do that, always have a very strong HR with a lot of support from the execs as well.
Okay.
So that's
Good
what
advice.
basically I want to explain.
Okay, good advice. Mr. Supra, what about yourself? Do you have anything to add?
I would like to reference to one individual matter and really common mistake in contract. I think from our experience, one glaring mistake that we tend to do is going back with contract of service and a contract for service on how sometimes companies, kind of create another idea of a contract. They take a portion from here, a portion from here, and then they create a hybrid contract. And when you do that, that is where you see, say for instance, I want to hire a particular consultant on a retainer basis, but it is not on an employment. I don't need him to come to the office and all. I need him to be more like a freelancer. I will say I'll pay him, 100 ringgit per hour for any consultation within the month, and then you say 5 hours per month. Okay? So that is let me say contract for service, right? Because it doesn't need to come to office, doesn't need to perform anything. It is more like an advisory. Okay? So when I engage in that, right, I prepare a contract for service. But one common mistake that we see is, okay, somewhere along that agreement, there will be the word employment. There will be one or two paragraphs will refer back to employment. Somewhere along the line in the remuneration, or the payment will be termed as base salary. Right? Then you will have, okay, but since this is a contract for service, all statutory obligation and tax will be on your own. So you kind of taken this contract of service and a contract for you go jump the whole thing already right now. So what's going to happen? Right? It can be construed as but it's got to go to arbitration, it's got to go to court in order for the court to determine whether this is a legitimate contract of service or contract for service. See, these are all the common mistakes that we make when we are designing contracts. And within the contract of service, it's the usage of fixed term contract, permanent full-time contract, part-time contract. So all these things comes in. So how you use the contract is very crucial, and just downloading from Google and customizing it yourself. You really need to understand why you are using the contract and for what purpose. Right? So these are simple contract issues that we see the error, but later dispute, because the person engaged can turn around and say, no lah, you say basic wage under KWSP Act, you got to pay me my EPF. Why haven't you paid my EPF? Right? So you can open yourself to all these kind of issues.
Good. Thanks for sharing. Okay. So I guess now on the contract of topic of contracts of service, perhaps Mr. Daniel, you'd like to share a little bit about what the difference is between a letter of offer and a letter of appointment, because a lot of companies use it interchangeably.
Generally, we all use. If you look at any organization today, the letter of appointment is used. Some companies call it offer of employment. Some call it letter of appointment. Some will call it employment contract. So different names. But if you really look at it, an offer, for example, Okay, let's look at the current scenario. Let's look at this endemic situation that we're in. Now, how would an offer letter work in this situation? I'll use this as an example. Now we need to, let's say for example, someone, you need to go to hire someone new, right? You need to hire a new employee. Now, what do you want to make sure with this endemic condition that we are in, that we have learned to live with the virus, right? So what are you going to make sure before the new employee comes in, right? Is this employee fully vaccinated? That means gone for the double dose and already passed the so-called the hibernation period or something like that, has gone through that, right? We have to have that first. Number two, apart from that, you need to also ensure that the employee has gone for, even before joining us, is willing to do a sort of like another test, a swab test or COVID test, just to ensure before they come in. Right? Next, we may also impose other things like, how should I say, that your employment shall only be, how should I say, be accepted or even subjected to all these conditions be fulfilled. Right? So this is the offer letter. Before you actually come there and sign the letter, the employee has to fulfill all these obligations before they accept the. So this is the offer. We are telling, oh, I nowadays we have this people also going, I don't want to be vaccinated, it's my right, right? So now here the employer is saying, you know what? As much as I respect someone's freedom, I need to protect my organization. So the offer letter is, it's like any other thing, like an offer and acceptance. I offer you this job based on these conditions.
Okay.
So you can put an employment precondition now, like in the offer letter.
Oh, so you're saying, the vaccination is like a criteria for joining the organization, right?
Of course, it's the employer's responsibility to protect everybody there.
Okay. Well,
Right?
what
so
about?
in fact, we are talking. Sorry, just a bit of extension.
Yeah, please.
At the moment, one of the things I would advise a lot of all the participants who are here, either yourself or your HR managers who are there, I think it's time for you to relook at your policies or your handbook, or even if you have a code of conduct. Because you simply cannot come up with terms. Yeah, you can come up with terms for the new employee, but those who are working in the company now, right? So you need to make changes, right, to ensure now, because we need to take in new steps now in terms of work areas, social distancing, what job can work remote at home, or what are the jobs that people need to come, how many people can be in. Yes, does our environment fit the social distancing SOP? So how do we arrange all these? We need to relook at our policies, our handbooks, so then only we can reflect it into our contracts. I mean, just to add on to that. Sorry, you were saying something, Mr. Raja? Please, proceed.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you raised a very interesting point, about this, like having conditions, for vaccinations and doing tests. So you're saying for new staff, it would be definitely good to have it, a clause, these kind of clauses in the offer letter. But what about existing staff, so staff that are already with the company or who are up for a renewal? Is it possible to put these clauses in the new contract?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah?
I think Mr. Supra, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
I think this is a bit more legal than Mr.
Mr. Raja, you are muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. No. It is. It's the trend that the country is going. All right. Let's look at it. And what is the position of the government with regards to getting people vaccinated? Right. Government highly encourage everyone to be vaccinated. All right. Now, if we were to compel an existing employee to be vaccinated and they unreasonably refuse, alright, let me qualify that. What I meant by unreasonably, except in my opinion, and maybe a different person will have another opinion. In my opinion, except for medical reason, you cannot be vaccinated. Alright, assuming if you were to go for a jab and that it will cause more medical complication, right? The rest ought to be vaccinated, right? Now, how do you compel them? In my opinion, the company must use this general clause under the employment contract or their terms and conditions or policy or handbook which says company reserves the right to, from time to time, introduce new working policies, all this, to go under that and issue a circular saying every employee is expected to be vaccinated within certain period of time, right? Failing which, the management reserve the right to determine the status of the employment, right? Now, assuming they still refuse and company decides to end that contract, employment contract, what right does the company has as a management and what right does the employee has as the staff of the company, right? Employer, as far as possible, has tried to comply with the law and the requirement and the general good of everyone who's working in the company. Now, employee here has unreasonably refused, right? In my opinion, personal opinion, right, the employee may not have a good case. May not, unless they can justify their refusal is valid, right? So, company can go ahead, assuming they do not have a general clause under the employment contract or their policies. Please do introduce one now, right? Go ahead and implement that. And I don't think so government or the agency is going to turn around and say, hey, you should not have enforced that vaccination process on your employee. No, I doubt it. Of course, you ask me whether there's been any cases on this, I'm yet to hear. These kind of issues need to be tested.
No precedent,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think this issue definitely come up. Yeah.
So for the
Please.
Mr. Raja, would you also encourage borders to put in the matter of vaccination, right? Would you also encourage for businesses or companies to include another clause called force majeure, right? Especially when we came to that situation March last year, right? We were all trapped. You know? Nobody actually knew, okay, you're not supposed to work for 2 weeks. Can't go to work. It is not the company that decided that I don't want to work. It's not the employee who decided that I don't want to work. Okay, it's the government who imposed the lockdown and saying you cannot work, cannot go to work, right?
Yes.
Then there is the question of what clause do I have in the employment contract that can basically protect my employer. Right? But in the civil contract, you have force majeure clause. Can we now have this included in the employment contract? Because I think this pandemic situation is going on and on. Cases go up, we might get into another lockdown. Yeah. So we might need to have this kind of contract.
Yep. Yes. I will highly encourage everyone to include that force majeure clause in the employment contract, but relating more towards the performance of that obligation under the employment contract. All right. Assuming we are forced to shut down and there is no job can be performed or the employer is not able to offer the job, what is going to happen? Now, the law says employer must offer the employment to the employee. But here, even though the status remains, but there's no employment per se, it's not taking effect. So what do we do, right? So this force majeure can be introduced under the general clause itself, right? Assuming, for example, I'm just saying this off my head, assuming from time to time the company is unable to offer any employment, parties reserve the right to review the terms and conditions of the employment, like as we go along, something along that line, right? Once that is reserved, then employers will always have a right to revisit at a later stage and then implement the processes accordingly. You know, most of the time, employers, I guess they want to. The main burden here is actually making salaries, paying out salaries. You know, that is the main burden when it comes to this kind of scenarios. Then, with this, employers should be able to revise, not completely stop. I mean, of course, if it is going to be prolonged for a certain period of time, then for stopping the salary payment for some time, possible. But all these things need to be tested per se, you know, because I have yet to come across any cases which talks about you are wrong in reducing the salary, you are wrong in not paying. You know, I believe there are cases with regards to the unlawful retrenchment taking place during the pandemic and all this. Not as to the salary, but Labour Office goes around enforcing this matter. Right? So it's best to have that contract in line with the current government policy. Now, because Act does not say this, you know.
The Act's a bit old.
Yeah, time to time the government issues policies, circulars with regards to the pandemic. Follow that.
Okay. So, Mr. Raja, where would you obtain, or which is a good resource to find this? So you mentioned the policies to refer to, right, by government. Like, which is a reliable source?
Of course, the main source has to be the government policy itself, the circular that they issue. Of course, personally speaking, we ourselves are no confused with the number of policies and the circulars that are coming out. You know, but within a week or two, something new comes up, and then everyone goes bonkers haywire about what is the real policy of it.
Yeah,
right?
there's a bit of confusion.
But understand the basic requirement of the law says once you are appointed, once you have performed the job, you pay the salary. So, you know, this term says salary must be earned.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
In this case, if they have not earned the salary by not working, how are you going to pay? You know, we are looking at the reverse way of it. You know, so have that clause, introduce that clause.
Force majeure. Okay. Okay.
Good thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
For new hire, I can use this clause. It's very easy, because I'm coming up with the offer. What happens to the existing workforce, right? Because right now, with modified employment terms, could they then now say, I don't want to sign this new vaccination
Yeah, what happens? Oh, sorry, Supra, you're cutting on the left.
you know, like
We lost you there.
Yes, sorry, Supra, you want to repeat?
Yeah.
Better now.
So for new employees, it's fine. I think that is letter of offer or employment contract, right? For existing employees who are already currently in the workforce, right? How are we going to impose this on them? Because can they then turn around and say, look, when I was hired, this was not the clause, right? So now you're imposing this, you know, and this clause is detrimental to me as an employee, right? So I'm not willing to sign. So what happens in that situation?
Right. You see, let's take the vaccination issue first. When company wants to introduce the vaccination policy, I don't think so the employee has the right to refuse, because this is in line with the government policies and procedures that are being introduced. So company can compel in that sense. Assuming they refuse, I guess the natural disciplinary process will begin. Right? Now, with regards to adjustments or revisions that need to be made to the terms, the fundamental terms that need to be revised is definitely the take-home pay, then the statutory contribution in accordance with that their respective pay. Company has to come up with a policy general policy saying it will be in line with the current pandemic and in line with the number of hours worked or number or amount of work performed. It has to be introduced. The winning formula has to be found. Introduce that policy. Go under a general circular, general policy, pandemic policy or whatever you want to call it, and then introduce it. Right?
Okay.
But assuming things goes back to the normal, then everything has to be reverted back.
Oh, have to undo it.
So do not use these policies as an excuse to permanently deprive them of their rights. So it is just a temporary measure that we are talking about. Go back to the original. Right? But assuming company refuse to go to original status, then the employee has all the right to take up the matter.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, good sharing. All right, let's seeing as let's hop back a little bit to I guess contracts of service. So I think just now it was mentioned the different types. So Daniel, I think you mentioned the full-time and permanent employment, full-time fixed-term employment, and part-time employment. Would you perhaps like to share a little bit about your thoughts on each of these types and how they're appropriate?
Correct. A lot of times, also just to share with you, just to take you back a little bit, Sam. Remember when you asked me the common mistakes? This is one of the common mistakes a lot of people make in how should I say, in issuing employment contracts. Right? When you employ someone, let's say the employment contract, if it should not have, the permanent employment contract should not have an expiry period. That means this person starts working for you 1st September 2021. That's a permanent employment contract. Right? 6 months completion. There's no end time period. Right? And in normal cases, a lot of organizations use that. But the mistakes we always find is that people do not put the word fixed term or anything like that, but they'll say this contract is valid for 1 year. Right? So that is a mistake. You can't do that. Permanent contract means it's a full-term employment. Right? Until retirement or resignation or termination for discipline or performance. Or the other way, expiry.
Okay.
Right? So these are the only ways this contract can be. However, we look at a fixed term contract. Fixed term contract is not something you can use for how I employ someone, work for 1 year, and then I'm not happy with this guy, I can fire him or not renew the contract. Right? That will open you for disputes. Right? Because that's how should I say, that is unfair labor practices. Right? Now, if you look at a fixed term contract, why do you use a fixed term contract? Fixed term contract by nature itself is for a short term. Right? For example, today Caritech gets a contract with Petronas, right? 2-year contract or 1-year contract, right? To supply and install HR software applications, right? Now, maybe in-house you have your own experts, but to deal with an oil and ONG company, you bring in an expert from outside, and this person is engaged for 1 year, and in his contract, you must say renewal of this contract shall be dependent on the renewal of the company's contract with Petronas. That means it's very specific, right? And of course, this expert that you bring in, you have to pay this expert higher than the person in the same position in your company, because you know what? This person does not have the expertise to handle oil and gas, whereas this person comes with that specific expertise. That's number one. Number two, where do you do? Next, the other thing you can look at is that projects. Right? You may have projects that you want to do. For example, let's say the company wants to do a certain project to build a certain application or what, and you have targeted it for 1 year. Right? You can bring in someone just to work that 1 year for you. Upon completion of the software, everything done already, his contract is over. Right? That's a fixed term contract. So the fixed term contract is not something for you to have in hand like a bullet to say, you know what, every year I can review this bullet. Right? And the mistake they make is the contract supposed to expire in 2018, and the contract supposed to expire in 2017, and I was doing the audit in 2019, not renewed.
Not up to date now.
So in essence, what has happened is that by their own inaction, they made it into a permanent employment. Would you agree, Mr. Raja?
Yes, this is by virtue of the conduct itself, conduct of the employer itself. You know? And now to suddenly turn around and say, no, you are actually appointed on a year-to-year contract or fixed-term contract. I can now decide to terminate you anytime. It's not a permanent employment. No, court will not recognize that.
Thank you, Mr. Raja.
What about Supra? Mr. Supra, you have anything to add? Fixed term or part-time employment?
When you talk about the contract, it's like the permanent contract, the expiry date is actually your retirement age. On the fixed-term contract, the expiry date is, you know, whatever time frame that you actually needed him for, right? And the other issue that you got to avoid is you try to put your contract and use the word automatically renew, right?
Yeah.
Because we like to use that because we are afraid that we might forget, you know, when. So it is shall be automatic. Then what happens? So it's like every time it comes to the end, it's automatically. It comes to the end automatically. You know, so we've got to have, that's why you have to HR to administer and ensure that all these are governed properly. Right? And in a situation where you want to hire part-timers, right? The law says, you know, when someone works between 30 to 70%, okay, of the company's working hours. Of course, under the law, maximum 48 hours per week. But my company works 40 hours a week, so it's between 30 to 70%. There is a specific regulation for part-time employees.
Okay. Yeah.
So now that you've got all these types of contracts, the question is, this all becomes your tool, right? And how do you deploy it for your business, right? If you need certain people on a part-time basis to come in for 2 hours, 3 hours a day, right? And you probably want to deploy a part-time contract. Or if you need someone, okay, on a 1 year, 2 year period only, then you go on your fixed-term contract of employment. And why we like to say that we want salaries are higher on a fixed-term contract, it is not by law. It is actually for you to be able to entice the guy to come and work with you, right? Because, you know, if my average salary is $10,000 and I used to be HR manager, now Roy and offer HR manager for a few years to get 200 per. But if he also pays me 10,000 hours a week, should I take this risk or not, right? So if he offers me 15,000, like, okay, you know what, I think it makes sense, 2 years, 15,000, I make 30 on that side. So it's more of a commercial decision.
Okay.
So this, then on a permanent, you understand, okay, these are the permanent number of employees I need in my business and all that, so you use the permanent contract. But I think at this, as market is going to one thing the businesses have got to sit down and really analyze, because the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise to me, right? Because it has taught us a lot of things. It also made, you know, things that you thought you cannot do, you can do today, like remote working environment. Some businesses is work fantastic, and people didn't realize that the businesses were able to adopt and adapt to that strategy very fast. So now you've got to look holistically at your business. Do I really need that person? Or maybe I'm actually only need paying. Then you know what? This other resource I can either do it on a contract for service, or external support, or a fixed-term contract, or a part-time.
Like a freelance, which is quite popular.
Plan your workforce.
Restructure. Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks. Yeah.
Yes, agree.
So
Yes.
Yeah, so now I guess now that we're on the part-time employment. Yeah, Mr. Raja, in your opinion, does it mean that those working below the 30%, like Mr. Supra mentioned just now, who are below the 30%, who are classified as maybe like a casual worker, who are does that mean that they're not entitled to employment benefits, even if I put them on like say 2 hours a week, from Monday to Friday?
Yes. As long they did not meet the minimum requirement criteria to work between the 30 to 70%, then they will be classified as casual worker, and the mode of salary, the wage earned also counts. So assuming they're casual worker on a daily basis and then you settle them on a daily basis, then there's nothing more after that. Right. But assuming you accumulate everything and make payments at the end of the day, and it turns out it is more than 30%, or even turns out more than 70%, even though the purpose of engagement is only casual worker, automatically they will be converted into permanent.
Automatically.
Or the part-timer, depending on the number of hours performed. And then that will naturally attract all the other legal provision. So what I'm trying to say here is don't try to hide the hours by paying less, settling less, and then making private arrangements to pay for all the other hours.
Like a cost-saving exercise. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But what about
that?
Could you place like I say a part-timer on a fixed term? Does that work? And just keep renewing the contract?
Yeah, fixed term for a certain period. You come work this many hours for a month. Possible. Can be done.
Okay, but so what about if without the definite period of engagement, in the contract, would they be deemed as a permanent part-timer? Is that possible?
Assuming we offering them say permanent part-time, but it's subject for the company calling you as and when needed. Right? Then at the end of the day, when you look at the accumulated hours, right, if it is below the threshold, then just classify them accordingly. But if it is above the threshold, then convert them according to that
requirement. Okay, thanks. So what are the rights of part-time employees? Can they file under Industrial Act Section 20 for unfair dismissal?
No, unfortunately no, because under Section 20 of Industrial Relation Act, it talks about workman. Workman means someone who has been appointed under a contract of service. Right? Now, contract of service again need not be in writing. I mean, according to the law, but it's highly encouraged that the contracts are issued in writing. But assuming it is not, right? So they will not fall under that Section 20 to be reinstated because they cannot prove that they are a workman, So, but assuming they are able to prove they are workmen based on the criteria that we have spoken earlier, because looking at the accumulated hours or days and then total wage take-home pay is more than what is the threshold talking about, then it is possible. But otherwise, it's very, very difficult. It's a long shot actually.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Okay. Yeah, thanks. So, So, okay, perhaps Mr. Supra, we'd like to share a bit about how do companies how do we protect ourselves from getting into situations where, the fixed term contract is seen or deemed to be a permanent one, like you mentioned.
To protect yourself, basically go back to the fundamental why you are hiring, right? And in what capacity is this person coming in, right? First you ask, you don't decide that I know Roy Daniel, okay, I create a position in my company for Roy Daniel, right? I see, Raja, I create another position for Raja, then I create an organization, but it doesn't work that way. It works based on my business. right? I've got a payroll business unit, I got say HR advisory business unit, I got a HRIS business unit. Then I will start looking for the people with that role, right? And I will then decide, okay, payroll is core and it's going to be a continuous thing. So would I hire, people on a fixed contract, full time, part time? Hey, all depends. Maybe at the lower level data entry, I could hire people on a part-time basis to come in to do that 3 hours work done, because my peak period is between the 15th to the 21st of the month, right? But at the supervisory level, I can't have that. I need things to operate continuously. So I'll probably hire permanent full-time. Then on the HRIS side, it is based on projects. So I got this project like, the Petronas HR system is required. Then I will probably hire people on a fixed term contract for that solution. So you've got to look at your business and then use the tool, okay, and determine which is the best thing.
Right tool for the right job.
And in order to then put inside the tool, right, the specific terms of employment and all that stuff, okay, that's another stuff. So that, of course, there are lawyers and all that around it. So you can seek the advice. Okay? One is you will seek advice from a statutory law perspective, right? What is required, what you do, and anything you do better with the statutory regulation is good and well. It's like the part-time act regulation and the Employment Act. It's a guideline. It didn't say that you must absolutely be 8 days only. But if I want to give 8 days, it doesn't mean. Right? So you then got to vary your conduct into all these situations. Right? So once you understand how to apply the contract, then it becomes a good tool for you to use it. Right? And it affects your business. It is also in favor of the employee. The employee knows what they are doing.
Okay.
So the problem is when we try to cut corners here and there, particular allowance, I don't want to do it. I think this one I don't want to, right? So you want to save the small little money and then you get caught. And you've been doing it for 2 years, you never got caught. Then on the 24th month, you got caught by year. They say now back pay everything for 2 years. Okay? Then labor office comes to another penalty. I think Mr. Raja will tell you about how the penalty can work.
Not cheap.
The penalties can be very heavy, so non-compliance with the law, non-compliance with the regulations will invite penalty, and if the penalty is not paid, it may also attract imprisonment. So don't take that risk. That's it.
So you're going to say interest, imprisonment. Okay. Okay. So what about so if I have a fixed term contract employee and say his contract is 24 months, but I decide his performance not so good, or the project he's working on has, ended prematurely. Therefore, I terminate his contract, before the 24 months, say like 1.5 years in. Okay, by issuing him a notice as per contract. Can he file a case of wrongful dismissal under Section 20? Sure, please.
Now, when you look at a contract, right, fixed term contract. Now, if you're going to end the contract after 24 months, the reason is your contract is going to finish, right? Your project is going to finish early, end of 4 months, right? Now, can the employee dispute? Yes, the employee can go to such a thing. I think Mr. Raja will point out further. But what is your exposure? Right? Now again we go back to what Mr. Supra mentioned, Mr. Raja you have mentioned. You must determine which position is fixed term and which is not. Right? Now for you to avoid any trap, it's like, let's say you have an accounts executive position in the company, right? And you don't have any other finance person, but actually just an accounts executive. Is that position permanent? It's permanent. right? It is there, it exists. Even when you take out someone, that position still exists. So you cannot give a fixed term for them. Right? So now we go back to this. Now let's say this person claims, I think Mr. Raja, they only can get back that even if they win. Now let's say this same employee now claims he's a permanent employee. He can even dispute you on that. Right? Because when you take someone on a fixed term contract, when you end the contract for projects and all that, you don't have any issue because it's clear cut. Contract over, I proceed. But if someone you take in using a fixed term contract, when you want to end the contract, then they can claim for wrongful dismissal, claiming that you know what, they'll get fined for it. That this is a permanent employment.
Yes, correct. You are right then. There are some higher court decision now which says that even company can camouflage that the appointment under fixed term contract, but by virtue of conduct and the way parties have performed the contract, court said agreed with the employee saying that it is not a fixed term contract but it is intended to be permanent. It is just the contract has been termed as 24 months or 2 years contract, right? So in that case, court was quite generous in awarding the damages to the employee. You know, they did not follow the 2 years contract. It went far beyond that normal balance contract period.
Yeah.
So the risk is do not hide behind technical clause. So if you intend the contract to be fixed term contract, follow it accordingly. End the contract at the end of the fixed term. For example, if it's 1 year, end 1 year, give some cooling off period, 30 days, and then issue another contract.
Yes, sir.
But do not go continuously for 2 years, 3 years, and then say, hey, no, it's fixed term now, I want to end the contract. No, it will not help the company at all.
So, like you mentioned, how does the court determine that the contract is a legitimate fixed term contract? Like you mentioned, the 1 month.
Nature of the contract, the way the contract is to be performed, and whether it's based on project basis. Right? Even assuming it's project basis, project is supposed to last for 3 years. Assuming within 1.5 years, the project has been performed and completed, right? And the company needs to end the contract.
So
the company can do that, but make sure it's all spelled out in the terms and conditions of the employer. But if it is not a project, but it's a position offered in a company, you know, and assuming they're appointed to come in and set up the entire department or revitalize the entire company for a certain period of time, then it is, yes, the project is for you to turn over the company within this period of time. Right? And if you are not able to perform, the company has the right to terminate. If you have completed the period, yes, then we decide before 1 or 2 months before the end of the contract, we decide, okay, whether we should extend the contract or whether we should end the contract. It has to be discussed way much earlier before the terms come to an end.
And sure, both parties are aware of the obligations.
And both parties actually must raise this concern and say, hey, look, my contract is coming to an end. Let's discuss about it. And renegotiate that contract and then enter into a new contract after the cooling off period.
Okay. Alright, let's okay. Daniel, what's your opinion on having a probationary period for those under fixed term contracts?
Okay. Probationary period, whether it all depends on the length of the fixed term contract, right? If you're hiring, you can even give fixed term employment for 3 months, the short term employment, or even up to 6 months. But let's say you're giving someone a fixed term contract 1 year. I think you should have a probation period. The purpose of the probation period is like, it's like starting to date lah. You get to know the person, you get to know the company, and company also get to know the employee. Then we look at the suitability and how we can move forward. Right? So the probation period gives you that part, the opportunity for the employee to learn, right? But in a fixed term, like say you assume that this person is an expert, but you still need to give the probation period because someone may have all the expertise, right? But they may not have the right attitude. Right, so that is very important because you can't bring in someone, although short term, to disrupt your company's operations because of the attitude. Right, so you need that period of time to assess the employee, and the employee has that period of time to assess should I or should I not proceed with this fixed-term contract. Right, so it gives them. In fact, in any employment, I've seen employment contracts being issued to so-called highly talented people without, in fact, added in the letter, you are deemed to be a confirmed staff. Right, 1 month later they need to fire the guy.
What happens?
Right? Yeah. The talents turn out to be not so talented.
Yeah, so that's a...
You must understand, when people come for interview, they're selling themselves, Alright? People market themselves, that you know what, I can build the next electric car for you. Right? So so that 3 months period give you, did I hire someone just pulling a fast one, or did I really hire a genuine talent?
Advertising and the actual product. Yeah. The advertising is good already.
I shared the experience with you. We were doing audit a company once, and I found out during the audit, I was looking at someone's resume, and the years in terms of degree and MBA didn't match. And I actually Googled and found out the university is a fake university.
Fake university.
Right? So people can fake a lot of things. They can, and then when we asked, so what we did was, how do you tell someone, hey, I want to review your certificate? That will look as if like victimization, right? So we came up with a memo, said everybody in the company, now all of you need to bring in your original copies of your degree and diplomas and all that for the company to validate. 1 hour later, they literally resigned and left.
Oh, serious?
Yes, because they understood
spot.
the moment you can't bring anything. It's an online university.
Can Google can download template?
Yes. But we downloaded all the information needed about the university.
Also, she just left.
Including transcripts. See, these also I can get.
Yeah, exactly.
So they left. So what I'm trying to say is that
Probation
period is very crucial. Right? Very crucial.
Yeah, Mr. Raja.
If I may
Please.
just add on to that.
Oh yeah, by all means.
I can hear?
Yeah.
Okay, if I may just add on to what Devan has said. When we are engaging the so-called experts for fixed-term contract or even a program contract, whatever, probation period is meant for them to show the company that they are suitable in that position, apart from the know-how of the job or know how to do the job, right? Now, when company, like for example, the example that Daniel gave just now, right? If assuming the company would have mentioned, now based on the interview and your CV and your confirmation during the interview session, we here now offer you this position, right? Is clearly making reference to what he has said in the job application, in the CV and his representation. And if it turns out to be wrong, that he cannot perform or his background is not as what he has said, right? Company has the absolute right to decide to immediately terminate the employment contract.
Okay.
Of course, follow
Procedure.
processes, but we don't have to go through the hassle of, for example, conducting a huge domestic inquiry and all this. The very fact that he has lied about his background is a good ground to end that contract. But follow the due process. Issue the show cause, ask for a reply. All this, but ensure in your appointment letter it's clearly mentioned that this appointment is based on your representation.
Truthful.
That will help the company a lot.
Okay, good. Yes. Okay. So perhaps Mr. Yeah. Mr. Supra, would you like to share how do you determine the right probationary period? So I think Daniel mentioned it just now, but how long? 3 months, 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
I think determining the probationary period will be dependent on the duration of the contract, right? So you don't put a 6 months probationary period when the contract is for 1 year. That's like half your tenure and your so there's nothing written on stone to say that the probation period for a 1 year contract must be like or like what is the reasonable amount of time, okay, that if you're the management, you're the company, you understand your business. So what is the reasonable amount of time for this person to be able to perform his job? Then the basic idea that he knows he can do the job, right? So for the company that I so for me, it all depends whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, right? It all depends
on the duration. Okay, that makes sense. Is it possible?
The short-term contract, like 6 months, like you probably will have a 1 month trial period. That's your probation period. You just
1 month possible.
Determine whether he's suitable. Can he do it?
Okay.
But because otherwise you would have hired someone, you're paying salary, and then you will be in a situation for 6 months. You are spending more time trying to teach him how to do the job than he supposed to
working
the job and helping right?
So what about setting the
why you have the probation period.
So I mean, with the probation period, like is it possible to have like a flexible period, like 3 to 6 months, or is it better to fix specific time frame?
I would recommend fix it and not, because otherwise it can be like you say 3 to 6 months or 4 months. So when does it actually expire? It's better for you to do a 3 months, and if you feel that this guy is totally below expectation, really bad performer, okay, then you can decide, okay, chop it off, okay, have to terminate the services and not continue. But this is your benchmark, but just come in just under the radar, you see that you can perform most of the work, some help, with some help, coaching and whatever he can perform. And you'll probably want to do an extension of that probationary period. Right?
You can do extension.
Instead of trying to say 3 to 6 months, you come to that point and say, okay, we'll extend you for another month or 2. Okay, because you're just falling below the mark. Then we'll give you another month to see whether you can meet the expectation.
Okay, so in order to do that, you would issue. So say in the contract it says states 3 months probation, but after the 3 months, I feel like I need to extend. So how would I go about is there like a verbal agreement or something, a letter or something?
No, my recommendation is make sure that when you say 3 months, every month you're sitting down with the employee for at least an hour or so, go through what you've done for the month, write it down, where is business and all that, okay, put that whole thing okay, and communicate with them.
Okay.
So he knows whether I perform or not. Right? So you do that on a monthly basis, right? So even if you come to the point that he's really a bad performer and you've got to let him go, you have got all the documents.
So you're saying it's a constant effort, like it's not 3 months.
About that time, and then say that we're not going to defer you, or we'll give you another chance and extend it by another 2 months, because you know what, you perform well in all these other jobs and these are the areas that you have not met our requirements. So we'll try to focus on these areas together with you and see how you can do that.
Sure. Yeah,
If I may,
yeah, please, Daniel.
What Mr. Supra said. You see, one of the things what I've done in a lot of clients that we work with here, and also is KL, what we have done is that we have actually, as part of us with setting up the HR policies and all that, we actually, as part of the probation policy, we have actually implemented things like new employee training, right? When someone comes in, let's say the lower ranking position, the probation is only 3 months, then the head of department then comes up with a 3-month plan. What are they going to train this employee in these 3 months? You can't train everything in 3 months, right? So you need to select what they need to know about the job and all that. So the 3 months. If it's a 6 months probation, you come up with a 6 months training plan, right? Because as a HR manager, I've experienced where people come to me and say, we need to fire this guy, he's not performing very well. And then when you see that they have not done any review, nothing has been done, and suddenly they started. So I turn this around. So whenever I get head of departments coming to me and giving me and saying, this guy needs to go, I will actually issue them a show cause email, asking the head of department to explain to me why is this guy not performing, what actions have they taken, and sort of create the awareness that is actually the responsibility of the managers. And why I'm sidetracking is a lot of organizations get into trouble because managers do not manage the probationary period properly, right? Managers must be made to understand that when they make mistakes, it's the company's money that is going to be spent. Right? They must be very clear there, because probationary periods, I tell you, a lot of times you go to IR, I think Mr. Raja will agree, the company will lose. Right? The company will definitely lose because the probationary period
done the work.
Yeah, they're not done in a structured manner. Right? Actually, yes, please, Mr. Raja, share.
Yeah, basically because the company do not have a proper process or SOP on how exactly it's to be done. That's number one. Number two, most of the time, the HODs are thinking this is the HR department's function. Most people have that false understanding, but everything needs to be initiated at the department level first. Then HR comes in and support. Alright, and the determination will be decided by status of the employment will be decided by the management. Right, so have that processes, have that policy, and follow them so that do not open up for issues or risks coming into the company at a later stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for that. So I think always the question that you guys have said, like probationary period is not just a thing where you can it's a reason to end someone's employment, right? It's supposed to be a tool, right, to ascertain whether or not this is a right fit for both parties. So and then I think Mr. Supra, earlier you were talking about using the right tool for the job, right? So all these contracts, everything we've been talking about are tools, right, for companies to manage the workforce, right? And it's not just not a tool just to save money, right? Perhaps you'd like to elaborate, on that point about all these contracts being a tool.
I think it is not just the contract, but the business overall. Like you were talking about, right? Probably have to start contract, right? And I think when you were just about to start to go back to work, whether you are in Pasar 1 going to Pasar 2, Pasar 2 going to Pasar 3, you've got all the SOPs that are coming in, right? And as a business, you got to study that SOP, understand what are you supposed to do as your sector is allowed to work. So you've got a stringent SOP to follow. So you need to have the guideline and policies, right? Okay? And how do you want to account vaccination policy and the force majeure clause? How do you go back to work now and look at all this? Do you have your contract and all in place? Number one. Number two is, are you deploying your contract in the right places for the right job, for the right position? Right? So you need to do a simple diagnosis of that. Make sure that this time when you're moving forward, you have technically bulletproof your HR SOP, contract, system and process. Right?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Good.
Can I just add on to
Please,
that?
Dennis,
As I mentioned earlier, in the when I started.
Mm.
Moving forward, I think organizations must understand that one system does not fit all. What fits for another organization may not fit you, right? And you don't have to follow other organizations. You don't have to. You can use them as a benchmark, but don't have to follow their. Come up with your own contracts. Define them properly within the nature of your company, right? Sometimes you don't have to be the highest paid person who pays, but by doing things right, employees might work with you because you're very honorable, right? So as long as we practice that kind of work ethics and all that, I think employment contracts should not be a big issue. So we need to get the fundamentals right. Get your policies, your practices, and all that aligned to this current endemic situation, like Mr. Supra said. And then from there, you can then design contracts in a more, how should I say, the word customized, right? If it's management, this is the contract. If it's an executive, this is the contract. If it's a rank and file, this is the contract. Because nature of job is completely different, right? So something like that. So that's my parting words.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Raja, do you have anything to add?
From our perspective, our experience in handling contractual issues in court, most often than not, company get into trouble because they try to find shortcut. Right? Please do not do that. Engage the right people to do the right job. Get consultants like Supra, yourself, and Daniel come in and assist and understand the fundamentals first before you higher up. Right? As long as you get the basics right, everything else should fall into place. Sometimes the small mistakes, very trivial, can be rectified. Don't do major mistakes. Ensure the contracts are watertight to protect interests of both parties, right? The company as well as the employees, right? Once that is done, the SOPs, the processes will come in and help the company to have a very cordial working relationship without interruption and issues in the future, right? Yeah,
Okay,
that's
good.
all on my side.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that's end of the day. That's what we want, right? We'll be able to work, carry out our work, in harmony, right? It's what we need to do. Okay, great. I think so. We've come to kind of the end of our discussion. So if any of you guys have any questions, Q&A, now I think now's the time we'll open up the floor. Just a couple of minutes. I know it's lunchtime already. So yeah. So if any of you have questions, you can unmute and ask, or you can post it in the chat.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
If you do all this after listening to all this, looks like an employment contract can be quite daunting to prepare. So for a small company like 3-man, 5-man, 10-man company, if they want to engage somebody, what's your practical advice to what they should do, who they should approach? Because obviously they don't have a HR department.
Good question. Yeah. Anyone want to answer that?
Okay, if you ask me, I mean, this is very administrative. If you look at costing wise, then engage or outsource this function to an establishment like what iHR do, or even like how what do you call that, SAM, what SAM does, right? And you should be able to save a lot more cost in that sense. Because I'm not on the ground to understand really how it works, but what I see the market trend now is people are outsourcing most of the functions. But do not copy paste once you have that template. Understand the job nature and then make the adjustment according to the job requirement. That's the most fundamental thing.
Does that answer your question? Thanks. Anyone else want to add?
Obviously you in the market, if you employ, let's say you operate a saloon, you have 2 or 3
Yes.
you don't go and when you want to engage a new person, you maybe just download or cut and paste or use a previous employment contract. But in view of all these changes, COVID and all that, it's actually very risky, isn't it?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but then they are not aware. I don't think they are even aware that, hey, look, I should go and pay, a little money for this online as a consultant or something like that. Yeah. Don't you think so? There's a very huge market in this. There are a lot of people out there. They are probably not aware, and they should be actually doing that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's a good thought. Just to share with you, there are sometimes iHR is really engaged by foreign companies. Sometimes they need to place certain people in Malaysia and localities here. So what they do is that they engage companies like this just to manage the payroll, issue the appointment letter from a Malaysian letter. All that they engage for us to do. So it's usually 1 or 2 employees, but the things that the payroll is managed, everything is managed according to Malaysian statutory and all that. So whether it's 1 person or 2 person, you're right, sir. We should get some expert help to develop all these contracts. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your feedback.
Basically, all these are investment. You invest in your own business, invest in your own processes, and you get tax relief for that. Make full use of that.
Yeah, but the point is they are not even aware of it. That's the point. They're not even aware. First of all, they are not even aware of the danger. Number 1, they are not even aware that you fellas out there can help.
Well, spread the good word.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, because I think
that makes me feel very energetic today, right?
Yeah, because usually when we talk about consultancy or legal, right? I think people think this is like these are things for big corporations, not for my little 2-man show or like little restaurant, right?
I've serviced clients here in Penang having 3-man jobs, only 5 people working in the office, right? So from their employment contracts to even their probation and all that. So because the business owner's main focus is focusing on the business. When you got 5 people, you're probably thinking, and this should not be holding you back. Your main focus is that you need to drive the business. So
sales.
We have done this for even smaller companies, 5-man operation, 10-man operations. That they need employment letters, they need the payroll to be processed properly. Even we have even customers in spa, right? We also have customers in spas, gym. So we sometimes we don't have like 10 people working, only 3 people working in a gym. So however small you are, that doesn't stop you from how should I say being professional in terms of employing people, right? The relationship must be very professional.
But is it cost effective?
Yes. You can look in the market now. There's like anything from you need to invest anything from 300 to even as low as 300 to 500 at the lower end. As you get a bit bigger, there's maybe up to 1500. But does not really cost you. Imagine you invest 500 ringgit in a month for HR help. You get like 50 years of expertise for that 500 ringgit, right? And if you get the same 500 ringgit, you can't even hire a HR executive. Or even 1,005 for that fact, you can't hire a HR executive. So when you go to a company and you hire their expertise for that same $1,500, you get an entire expertise on HR, IR, and everything together because there are people there in that company that can support you. So basically, we need to but how should I say? It's an investment, right? It doesn't have to be high, and that's what we always believe that HR does not have to be expensive, but it has to be valuable. It's as low as to be expensive. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you for the question. Any other questions before we conclude? Nothing in the chat so far. Yes. Okay. Catherine. Yep.
I miss Catherine in the chat. That's interesting.
Yep.
She says fixed term contract is a 1-year period. Probation is 3 months. Let's say the employee and he can't pass the probation period, then the company will decide to end the contract. Should the employee pay the company the remaining 9-month wages? No. It's how you actually work the contract. Mr. Raja, what do you think?
Yes. Totally agree. No, listen. Don't fixed term contract usually, in my understanding, are done for the upper management. Right? They usually come ready with their background and their experience already. It is just whether they are able to perform that function under that role in that company. Right? So this can be decided way ahead and give that ample window or space for them to improve. You get the idea of what I'm trying to say. So don't wait until the third month for the fixed term contract and then you want to make a decision. Sometimes it may not be really helpful for the company.
But so in this case, if they've already made up their mind not to proceed, like you said, so say before the 3 months they already decide, okay, this guy cannot perform. So how shall they go about terminating? Like, do they need to pay the rest of the amount, or just the penalty, or what?
No. I'm very sure there will be a notice period under that fixed term employment contract. Follow that notice period.
Like a 1 month or 2 month, right?
Yes, justify that termination. The employer must justify. But if they say, hey, look, you're not performing, so we want you out and we give you that 2 weeks or 1 month notice, how you go? No. So then, even if this person is not going to go into the employment law part of it, they can go under the civil law and claim for the balance contract period in the civil court. This is where the Contracts Act comes in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we must be very. So Mr. Rajan, may I add this then? Just my question. Then it's how we state we describe our probationary period in the fixed term contract. That should you not be able to perform up to the expectation of the company reserves the right to end this fixed term contract. Can you state that there?
Yes. Please do that. But again, how do you decide company's expectation? If it is nowhere shown what is the company's expectation, and then you want to invoke the clause and say you did not meet company's expectation, again you're opening up yourself for some dispute. Be very transparent, put forward this is company's expectation, this is the processes, this is how it's going to be done. If you're not up to the mark, how to go?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Catherine, I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Supra, any thoughts on this, Mr. Supra?
Well, basically, if you look at it, right, the company can justify, like what the company can justify that the person really did not perform, right? Of course, you will invoke the clause in your termination of this clause, but there is no requirement to pay the balance of the 9 months. And in the event your processes are not right and you cannot justify the termination, and if you go to court, then you will have to pay the 9 months salary.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Catherine, for your question.
Okay. All right. I think is there any other questions anymore? Otherwise, I think no, we'll probably call it there. Thank you. Thanks. So if you have any other questions that you perhaps like to find out, through one of us, feel free to drop us an email, and we also have a feedback form that we would like you to kind of give us some feedback on what you thought about our sharing session. So that'll just be in the chat now. You guys can click through, and we'll also email to all of you. So so thank you to our 3 panelists, Mr. Raja, Mr. Supra, and Mr. Daniel. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and thank you to all of you for joining us today on this Friday.
Thank you for inviting, and hope you all had a good session.
Excellent. Okay. So I hope everyone learned a little something, and look forward to our next session.
Feel free to drop us an email, Sam. If there's any inquiries, anything that you're not sure, that feel free. Please drop us an email, and you know what, we will help you where we can.
Yeah, you guys are the experts. We're
always here to help you. Just drop us a line, and we'll see how we can help you. Right. So thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Sam.
Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.